college is kind of taking shape. The Final Four, the original one came out yesterday with obviously Oregon and Washington tailing. And clearly because they're going to play each other. Ohio State and Michigan have to play each other. Jim McElwain, former Fresno State offensive coordinator. I wouldn't say caught red-handed. He's denying, but it's pretty clear when you look at his connection with Harbaugh, with our Marine. Thank you for your service. Who's pretty dominant at stealing sides. Ultimately, I wish this story didn't exist because this is just an incredible college football season at the top. I think all these teams can win it. The problem is, I'm sure you saw the story, the Big Ten coaches call, and I don't blame the other coaches for being pissed off. You just have to wonder, a lot of these scandals, right, always are delayed. So we'll find out in a year what's going to happen to Michigan. They'll get a bowl ban or whatever. It does feel like there's going to be a lot of urgency to do something quick from the conference. And it's going to be fascinating how that, because I would say from a title contention perspective, most people would say Michigan's the best team right now. Mm-hmm. How do you think this shakes out?
Yeah, I mean, the conference angle is the most interesting to me. The NCAA works so slow. Like they're
like a local bureaucracy. They're fucking idiots.
Yeah. So there's not going to be any impact from that perspective. And yeah, I mean, Michigan's the favorite in the Big Ten for a reason. Like next week, there's a line already out for the Penn. Like they're it's 5.5, 6-point favorites at Penn State, and they host Ohio State. And it'll be really fascinating to see. Ultimately, I don't think anything's going to come of it, and until it's too late and Harbaugh's gone, and then Michigan program will then take a hit. We saw this with USC for other reasons, Penn State for other reasons, Arizona State. We've seen this before, and then your program takes a hit. But everyone that was actually involved in it is gone. They get other jobs. Harbaugh's probably coaching the Raiders or the Bears, and he's out. So I don't think it'll end up having any impact on this year. But the conference angle, if like the other teams raised enough stink, I don't know. I'm not too in tune with the processes and timing there, but that's the only thing that's going to happen because the NCAA is not going to do anything in time before everyone's gone, and then it's a bowl ban, and then you have a couple.
Yeah, I think the only question mark right now is because clearly if you're Michigan, whether they end up taking this away from you or not, you want to play this thing out and win the thing this year. Yeah. Now there could, depending on the fervor from everyone else around the conference, do they force something to happen, fire him? I do, and I've always supported. I thought the Belichick thing was a little overrated, Spygate, even this at first. But the more you see how intense and the levels in which they were going, I saw some unnamed coaches, and they're right. Like, it's one thing to steal signs. It's another thing to literally know all of our plays are either run or pass. Like, this isn't even real football. And it's like, yeah, which sucks because like Harbaugh for all these years finally built up these last couple of years what we hoped Michigan would become. And now it feels like it's all going to stop. And like you said, maybe he was inevitably going to go to the NFL anyway. But if he was just rattling, if he won this national championship, Georgia style, you'd be like, well, they could pay him $12, $13, $14 million a year. Maybe he just stays there and tries to win a couple. And now this feels like the last couple months of his Michigan tenure for sure.
Yeah. My two main questions, and this will all eventually come out, I imagine, is one, like, from a betting perspective, I have no, like, it's very hard for me to rate Michigan. Like, how much of their success.
Have you gambled on Michigan a lot over the last couple of years?
Yeah, I mean, I bet against them twice this year and lost. So I was joking with a friend of mine who is an odds maker out in Las Vegas, and I was like, can I get a refund here for some of these bets when I faded Michigan? But so yeah, like how much of that influenced their results, and so that's very tough for me to gauge. So if, like, for now, I think I'm mainly just like staying away from Michigan games. But the other thing is, like, where did this idea come from? So like, how widespread is this? So we know that every team does this in some form or fashion, but are other teams sending guys? And like, did this come from another team? And like, is this actually more prevalent than we think, right? As far as like going to the lengths that Michigan did, how many of the other top programs are going to those lengths. I don't think anyone is being that extreme, but maybe they are. I mean, we didn't know about Michigan until just now. So that's something I'm curious about. Like, what are some of the other teams doing and to what extent? And then from a betting perspective, like just for now, it's very difficult for me to gauge Michigan games because it's impossible to quantify what the actual impact is.
Okay, a couple big games. Obviously, Clemson, who sucks relative to what they've been. Dabo's been pissed off playing Notre Dame. SC, who easily could have lost to the California Golden Bears last week. I mean, that running back had like 150 yards and 3 touchdowns 15 minutes into the game. I mean, their defense is even worse than I think the way we were hyping it up. And now they play Washington, probably you could argue the most explosive offense in all of college football. So it's just like, let's start with there. I mean, the line is not that big. I got Washington -3. I feel like, I don't know. I mean, obviously Caleb, they can score, but it feels like there's a chance. Is this a 60-40 type game?
The total is 78. So that'll tell you all you need to know about this game. I got bad news for you, or if anyone cares what I think. I played both Clemson and USC after I've done nothing but fade Clemson and USC, except for that Utah game when you were right. Swore them off. I faded them last week against Cal again. Been fading Clemson for all year, but I took them both +3.5. I had to. I mean, my numbers just called for it. It's number one with Clemson +3.5 at home against Notre Dame. I mean, they were +1.5 at home against Florida State 3 weeks ago, and should have won.
And Dabo is right where they're not getting killed. I mean, they could have won a lot of these swing games. They could be 6-2 pretty.
Yeah, they could be 8-0 if you really they could be Florida State. They lost in overtime. They lost to Miami in overtime. You know, they outgained NC State by about 300 yards. They held them to 180 yards, and lost that game by 7. So, yeah, I mean, they've lost.
Duke game, they got outplayed, but they did turn the ball over.
They also were in the red zone, 50 times, and kept fumbling it. They lead the nation in fumbles. Their defense is still really good. They have a running back that got hurt, and Will Shipley. I think that's a good thing. You get more Maffa, who's the better back. He's also the better pass blocker. The defense is still elite. Notre Dame, I mean, look, this is Notre Dame team that went on the road, got crushed by Louisville, should have lost at Duke. And now, I mean, this line is, I just can't get here with this Clemson team. You also have to remember Notre Dame, they just lost their star tight end who was playing out of his mind, their leading receiver, Mitchell Evans. He's out for the season. He got hurt last week. That's a big loss for them. He was a security blanket for Sam Hartman. But this is just a classic buy low, sell high spot. I had to take the 3.5. At 3, it's Clemson or nothing. They've certainly been unlucky. They're on the downtrend because they're just not as talented anymore because they don't hit the transfer portal like other teams, and Dabo refuses to adjust. Maybe a season like this gets them to do it, but
it will.
Yeah, it has to. Otherwise, they're just going to fall way behind. You can just look at the receivers. That's the biggest thing. Their receiving talent is just, I mean, this is a program that has dudes that are killing it in the NFL. Now there's nothing there. And you just compare it to their top teams. Florida State went out and got a guy from Michigan State who's going to get drafted in first or second round. He's killing it for them at receiver like that. It's crazy that they're not using it. And that's why they're taking a step back, but +3.5 against Notre Dame, have to take it. USC, I had to take it. I mean, I hated myself when I bet it, but this Washington team is kind of broken. If you look over the past month, they should have lost to Arizona State. If Arizona State had a kicker, and they have basically like a Mac kicker, they missed a couple field goals. Then instead of going up 6 with 8 minutes to go, they don't even trust their kicker to make a 30-yarder. They throw a 90-yard pick 6 in that game. Washington didn't even score an offensive touchdown. Then Washington almost like last week against Stanford. There's a couple problems going on with Washington. They can't run the ball. I mean, last week Arizona State, they ran it 13 times for 13 yards. Last week against Stanford, one of the worst rush defenses in the country, they ran it 27 times for 90 yards. Their interior offensive line is struggling. They've been reshuffling guys. Even their receivers, like the offense isn't clicking the same way it was during the season. You have 2 really good receivers, but McMillan, one of your other depth guys, they're hurt. And the defense has fallen off a cliff. because you have injuries and they just don't have a lot of depth. They don't have the depth of Georgia. They don't have the depth of, Alabama. And they have their best defensive lineman, Tooley. He's been out for a month. He's huge. They have three or four, Turner, Camfab, a couple of the guys that are hurt at safety. So they're down to like third string safeties that are playing. So the depth of that defense has taken a huge hit, and they can't really stop anyone. You go back to that Oregon, and they should have lost to Oregon at home. Oregon just went 0 for 3 on fourth downs, and then Washington had that last minute touchdown. But this is a team that's treading in the wrong direction. Are they going to score against, on this USC defense at will? Yes, of course. Everyone can. I mean, we'll take you, me, producers. We'll find, we'll just walk on the street and find the next 7, men, women, or children. And it doesn't matter. We'll put 11 together and we'll score. One saving grace for USC is that Washington does not run the ball at all. And they can't run it. So the USC pass D is like semi-respectable. They have some, decent pass rushers, and then they have some talented guys in the secondary. They can't tackle and they cannot play the run. It doesn't matter who's running against them. And Jaden Ott's a really good back for Cal. You saw him running wild. You saw Utah running wild. But Washington doesn't really run it. So, from a matchup standpoint, you might be able to get a couple stops just from your D-backs making plays or getting a sack, because Washington's just doesn't run it, and they can't when they do. But ultimately, I make this number I make this closer to a coin flip because Washington's trending in the wrong direction. I think they're a bit overrated. What would the narrative be if they actually lost to Oregon? If they actually lost to Arizona State, as they should have? They'd be right in the conversation with USC. Is that their defense is overrated, and they can score. So I took the 3.5. Ultimately, what I think happens, this is a must-see TV game. It's just bad. Whoever has the ball last. So I'll take the 3.5 with the home team.
It's pretty clear once Washington pulled off, I don't want to call it an upset, but once they beat Oregon, the two teams since, Oregon looked dramatically better, right?
Yes.
Oregon, they killed Utah. Beside the first couple of drives, they handled Washington State, who was playing pretty well at the time. Oregon looks fantastic. And I was watching a lot of that Stanford game. Stanford was a drop pass away from potentially upsetting them kind of late in that game. So I'm with you there. Okay, let's get in the NFL.
Oregon's a class of the Pac-12.
Yeah.
They're the most complete team.
And they could win the national championship. To me, they could play with some people for sure. They're physical. Agreed. They got skill guys, team speed, their quarterback, more starts than any other. He's played more college games than any other player in college football history. Now it's skewed because you get the free year, but
they have enough balance. Washington, I don't think has the balance or depth. Oregon has the defense. They also have the running game with Bucky Irving. He might be the number 1 running back taken in next year's draft. So Oregon, I think, is the most complete team in the Pac-12. They're the team that has the best shot of winning the national title from that conference.
My pig farmer quarterback came back to earth against Utah, but he played well when he needed to.